Seals of Forgotten Time Chapter 1. Months after Peen's utter destruction of the village, the villagers, both citizens and ninjas, were working on rebuilding the village. Tents were set up outside of the perimeter, while the buildings were getting put together. Construction workers from other nations traveled to the destroyed Konoha site to help rebuild and provide the necessary supplies to get the job started. Moments later we see somebody making hundreds of shadow clones to quicken the pace of constructing the village. He had blonde spiky hair, tanned skin, and 6 identical whisker marks on his cheeks, 3 on each. Because of his condition, his canines and nails were longer than usual, making them fangs that poke out of his mouth and claws. Also, the pupils in his ocean blue eyes were slitted, making it fox-like an appearance. He continued to wear his orange and black jumpsuit. When the villagers witnessed the mass creation of blonde shadow clones, they cheered for their hero, shouting things like, "Our blonde hero has finally arrived," and "Hooray for the hero of Konoha." Some even walked up to him and asked for his autograph. Usually, this would make Naruto blush in embarrassment, but after months of continuous praise, it started grating on his nerves. He had things to do and these people continued to interrupt his plans. "Please people, I'm very busy. I only created the clones to lend you a hand while I was on my to do my own thing," he said, walking between the villagers thinking about just what he was going to do. After nearly going 9 tails against Peen and meeting his father face to face, he decided to search for his father's estate to collect what was his. He had thousands of clones searching all around high on Kuni. His father mentions something about his house being near a mountain. His clones checked the Cage Mountain already and found nothing. But also considering his father's Hirashin technique, the house could be anywhere in the entire continent. Hell, it could be in Iwagakure for all I know, which would be weird. He shook his thoughts away and focused on the job at hand. 3 weeks later. It was now 3 weeks later and the nations were at war. Of course, Naruto wasn't told, but he still knew. After all, he had gotten smarter and more calmer. Right now he was in a giant turtle. He was given a mission to study and file some animals. So you could already tell he's pissed about that. Well, at least something good happened before he got the mission. He found the house of his father around 2 weeks ago. It was on top of a mountain, a couple of miles away from the Valley of the End. He climbed the mountain using nothing but his hands, as physical training of course. I could still remember how pissed I was, the blonde thought as he sat next to a tree to begin meditating for a while. Flashback 2 weeks ago. The blonde was currently climbing a mountain. His clone informed him his father's house was near the peak. He was suffering from a mild case of nostalgia, due to the house being a couple of miles away from the Valley of the End, where he had his first true fight with someone he used to consider his brother. His head peeked over the top of the mountain, and he pulled his body over the top. He was confused how someone would put a house so far up a mountain, or how they even got the supplies up here. He was currently looking over the side of the mountain. He could barely see the ground. Suddenly a bolt of lightning passed right by his ear. Some of the bolts touched his ear, causing it to become numb. He turned around to see fireballs coming at him. He swiftly dodged, using chakra to quicken his movements. He ran forward at the regular house that was firing the techniques, but it was difficult when spikes made of earth rose from the ground under him. He didn't know how, but purely on instinct he focused chakra on the bottom of his foot, until the chakra actually became solid, and stood on the spike as it rose up. He hopped from one spike to another like this, until after the 5th hop he landed on the ground. How'd I do that? He asked himself, before a whirlwind surrounded him. Yet again on instinct he jumped straight in the air, over the top of the small whirlwind, and landed outside the whirling. He sprinted to the house after landing, and just as he got within 10 yards a force pushed down on him. The gravity was intense. It was at least 10 times as much as it was a couple of feet behind him. Holy kami, I'm so heavy. What the hell is wrong with this place? He looked up to see a structure of rock rising from the ground. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered, using all of his strength to rise to his feet. Only one of the whirling blood could command this creature. A strange voice spoke from every direction. The blonde didn't have time to freak out because the golem charged at the teenage shinobi, not having a problem with the gravity effect. The blonde was immediately punched out of the area, landing an inch from a spike. Naruto held his chest in pain. He was surprised his heart didn't pop because that hit hurt like hell. He looked up to see the golem coming at him, except this time he was even faster. Oh, I see, without being weighed down, the rockhead could move faster. Great. Naruto thought, rolling to the side, causing the golem to miss its punch and completely destroy the spike. Not wasting any time, Naruto dashed back to the area where he knew the gravity effect would be in place. Might as well get used to it. I could use this as furthering my physical training, he said as he felt himself being weighed down again. He jumped back as the golem struck with an overhead axe strike. Naruto then jumped as high as he could when the golem threw a wide haymaker. He landed on the arm, but when the arm stopped he kept going and he was flung from his position. His face collided with the floor and he yelled into the ground. His danger sense told him to roll, and since it saved his life so many times in the past, he rolled over. Just in time, because the golem's fist was in the ground. Now on his back he reached into his pouch and grabbed an exploding note and threw it in the boulder's face. Katsu! He yelled as it exploded. He used this time to rise to his feet and make a run for the house. Without even going a full meter, his right foot was grabbed. He looked back to see the golem was without a scratch. This is going to hurt, he mumbled as he was lifted into the air and slammed to the ground. He coughed blood as dust rose around him. This cannot be the way it ends. I need to think of a way to put an end to this torture. He became angry, and when a small amount of Kyuubi's Yaoki entered his system he began to yell. You fool, stop using my chakra. The blonde stopped the flow of demonic chakra, causing the pain to stop. Don't use my chakra again, there's something different about this place. And the use of demonic chakra causes serious pain. Remember that kanji we seen carved in the side of the mountain on the way up here? Yeah, it said, Shin, meaning pure, so I guess anything that deals with malice or hatred would get rejected painfully. Right, you need to find another way to deal with the rock. The blonde nodded as he felt himself being lifted into the air, getting an idea. As he came out of the cloud of dust he finished his last hand sign. Here, eat the only lightning technique I know, Raiton. Raitosho. Almost immediately a series of lightning bolts came out of Naruto's hands. The blonde knew that Earth was tremendously weak against lightning techniques. He was proved right when the golem exploded, causing rocks to fly everywhere. He landed on his back with a smile on his face. Ha, it's over, he panted. This time he was proved wrong when the structure began to repair itself right before his eyes. Oh come on, really? He said as he began to remember what he heard earlier. Only one of the whirling blood can command the creature. Does that mean only an Uzumaki can take control of the golem? He said to himself as the golem in question was fully put back together. The walking boulder began walking toward the blonde genin. Stop, the blonde yelled, causing the golem to falter in its step. This angered the blonde. I command you to stop. This didn't do anything as the golem continued. I said be still, Naruto yelled, 1 because he was angry with the golem and 2 because he was feeling pain worse than when Pain stabbed him with all of those rods. This had the most effect as the golem stopped. Now go back to wherever you came from. The golem nodded and began breaking, the ground absorbing it. After the last rock was absorbed, Naruto dropped to his knees, the fight finally over. After a while Naruto rose back to his feet and begun walking towards the house. Well, at least you can move easier. Yeah, that's because I had to fight a fucking structure of rock. I guess you can do anything when you have to fight for your life, even if it's withstanding gravity 10 times the regular amount. After reaching within 5 yards of the house, a hologram of his mother and father appeared in front of him. He took a step back in shock and surprise. He was more surprised when the holograms vanished. Thinking it was a genjutsu, he pressed his fingers into the ram seal and muttered, Kai, sending a pulse of chakra in all directions. He watched shocked as places in the air became distorted and just inches around the house, telling him there was some kind of barrier around the house and also where the jutsus came from. After his revelation he stepped forward, bringing the holograms of his parents back. "Hey son, I see you found the house and got past the golem. That's your Uzumaki blood at work there. I was a little nervous with the idea, but I can tell you activated the lost bloodline of the Uzumaki." "Wait, bloodline? What bloodline?" "I have a bloodline. Unfortunately, I have no idea what the bloodline is supposed to be. All I know is that there was another with it." Kushina stopped talking. "Another Uzumaki with the bloodline, but who is it?" "I'm the only Uzumaki in the world, the last of my kind." "QB, did you find anything different about me yet?" he asked his tenant. "Nope, nothing at all. Sorry, kid." "Wow, look at you, you sure have grown. What are you, 13? Maybe you're 14 years old. I remember when you were just born, you were so small, you could fit in my hands," the hologram of the Yondaime said, holding out his hands. Naruto grew angry as the speech progressed. It seems that he was supposed to inherit his parents' place when he turned 13. He clenched his hands into fist, his nails digging into his skin and nearly drawing blood. "So how does it feel being a genin? I see you're wearing the Konoha Hita 8 proudly." Minato finished his speech. At this point Naruto just walked forward, his nails drawing blood. It wasn't even a second later when blood pooled inside of his hands before it seeped through his knuckles, running down his fist and dropping onto the floor. "Calm down, kid. Weren't you on the training trip with your sensei during that time period? And besides, who in the village would even know about your family's private house? Nobody, that's who." "Now calm down." Naruto had reached the door to his house, not paying attention to his hologram parents. He did calm down after hearing his tenant. He grabbed the knob to the door. When his bloody hand touched the knob, seals that on the knob spread out and soon covered the entire house. This little even also cancelled the barrier around the house and his parents' holograms. He entered the house to find that it was a regular house. It had a couple of chairs and a table in the middle of the living room. The kitchen, although spacious, didn't contain a lot of food. There was only 2 bedrooms, his parents' and the other wasn't entirely finished with the decorations. He could tell though that it was supposed to be his. He found a door in the small hallway and opened it. Well, he tried to open it, he realized there was a seal with the kanji for blood in the middle. He looked at his hand, the previous blood that covered it was gone, having wiped it on his pants, and the wound healed thanks to the fox. He slid a claw over his palm, bringing fresh blood. He pressed the hand to the door, watching it light up for a while before he heard a click and the door slid open. He watched his palm heal before walking in, finding a very large amount of scrolls on Fuinjutsu, Ninjutsu, and Genjutsu. He looked around and even found some Taijutsu and Kenjutsu scrolls. After an hour in the library, he left hundreds of clones to learn every single thing they could. Because let's face it, as he didn't have a chance to survive in this war. He also needed to find a way to defeat the remaining Uchiha. He stood outside of the house, getting ready to make his way down, with the thought of his mysterious bloodline on his mind. Release flashback. Naruto looked around scoffing as Kirabi wrote lyrics in a little notebook. He needed to find a way of this island. He was getting tired of all of the animals, and he's only been here for a couple of hours. What kind of S-rank mission was this? Taking care of and categorizing the animals on this island. Sometimes he hated his village. "Yo 9, let's go tame yo beast," the big dark-skinned Kumo ninja said. The blonde glanced at the Hakabi container. "Sorry B, but I've got my own agenda," he said using a body flicker. He appeared at the peak of the turtle island. His headband's tails were blowing east with the wind. He knew he was in the coast of Kumo, and if he knew his geography, the way back home would be south. He focused wind chakra to his feet and jumped as far as he could, using his newfound skill in advanced wind manipulation to help himself glide in the air. It wasn't long until he landed on the water, half a kilometer away from the island. He didn't stop there. He focused his secondary element to his feet and vanished in a spark of electricity. Since Konoha didn't want him to fight in the war, he was going to have to go solo and face Madara himself. He had dozens of clones looking at seals at his house. He knew the man could make himself intangible for a duration of time, by putting his body in another dimension. He just didn't know how long he could stay in that little pocket dimension. So he needed to create a time-controlling seal, something that nobody has achieved. Ever. Well, I'm going to be the first, he thought as he continued running on the water, thankful for his large reserves of chakra, because this was going to be a long run. Several hours later. After running for hours, Naruto was beginning to get tired of running. Constantly using lightning-converted chakra to make him go faster than he could ever dream of doing with regular chakra, was starting to really drain his chakra. He looked around and noticed a small chain of islands were near. It was time to take a break anyway. Maybe he could use the time to check up on his time seal. He walked on the little shore and dropped into a meditative position and tried to speak with one of his clones, hoping he could from this distance. "Boss? Do you?" Naruto heard in his head as his clone's voice was zoning in and out. The blonde shook his head and stood up and moved to a closer island and repeated the process, getting the same transmission. He continued to do this until he gave up and just got back to running. After an hour he saw a cruise ship, a boat civilians take vacations on. It was perfect as they were going the same way he was. Now he could relax and restore lost chakra. But not at the moment, as he has yet to board the ship. He stealthily jumped on the side of the ship and poked his head over the railing. The first thing he saw was a beautiful civilian teenage girl stretching before she got in the pool. She was bending over, her fingers touching her toes. She was dressed in a pink, two-piece bikini and had long luscious legs, and a firm behind. She had really long pink hair that went down to her firm ass, and that's all he could see of her. He quickly dropped his head back and fell back to the water. He was blushing and a small trail of blood went down his nose at the thought that popped into his mind, at what he could do to that girl. I knew it deep down that perverted sensei of yours has tainted you, now you're one of us. Ha 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 ha. The blonde heard a deep voice in his head. Naruto shook his head denying the accusation and formed the ram seal. He transformed into a bird and flew on the deck. He craned his neck watching the civilians, keeping up the act of a bird to some of the people that were watching him. He flapped his wings and flew high into the sky passing the clouds, where he dispelled the technique and quickly made shadow clones, and they all transformed into birds. The flock of cloned birds then dove towards the ship and landed in various places, with the real Naruto landing somewhere else and dispelled his disguise. He removed his height and proceeded to take his jacket and shirt off. After he finished, he commanded his clones, via mind link, to fly to the private house, where they'll dispelled their disguise and replace his other clones. All needed to complete the look of a vacationing citizen was swimming trunks. He glanced around and headed towards the lodging of the boat and looked around for some trunks. He started checking the vacant rooms, but some rooms were vacant, which made him wipe his nose. He found some trunks in a vacant room and quickly put them on after taking his pants and sandals off, sealing everything in a timed seal on his arm. He only had about 2 days before the ink was used up and his stuff appeared. The trunks looked great in his opinion. They were black with an orange fiery dragon on his left leg. He looked himself in the mirror and gave a smile as he then stepped outside and began to relax. He sat at a table and a waitress walked up to him. "Hey sir, would you like a drink to help relax?" she asked him. Her dark red hair flowing with the breeze and her large C-cup breasts were straining against her white and black shirt. Naruto nodded and she brought him a drink minutes later. He took a sip and relaxed, looking at all the lovely ladies around him. "How I needed this little break. I wonder if B told them I was gone yet," he thought to himself. 2 days later with the allied cages. He did what? Sannin of the Sannin roared in anger at Naruto's stupidity, as Kirabi calmly stood there in all seriousness. He was carrying Samihade, with the previous owner, Kizum, being dead and all. That's right, Hokage Dono, 9 just up and left. He doesn't even have his beast fully tamed yet. Without proper control he's going to be captured by Madara. The Oxygen Shuraiki said. "I don't doubt your accusation, Kirabi-san. We must find him before it's too late, Anbu." She yelled and a 4-man squad of Anbu appeared in black cloaks. "I want you to find and bring Uzumaki Naruto back here, where he will be given his punishment," she ordered, and Anbu nodded and vanished. The big-breasted Hokage turned back to her fellow Kages but was stopped from speaking when Mato-gai entered the room with some news. "Hokage-sama, that enemies are mobilizing." All 5 Kages steeled their emotions at the news and started to mobilize their own troops, thus fully uniting the 5 nations. 3 days later, Naruto had been working on the seal that would help him end Madara's life, the entire time he was on the cruise. In private, of course. Which was hard with all the ladies wearing skimpy bikinis, and having water cling to their bodies, making him and others enjoy their assets even more. He even had fun the last day of the cruise, with the same chick whose ass was in his face when he first tried to sneak on the ship. Man, was she kinky. "Hey Kit, how many times do you think she bit into your neck?" the fox said, causing Naruto to shiver in delight after being reminded about how kinky she was. "A couple times for ball." "What was her name again?" Naruto asked, wearing a pair of black cargo shorts and a skin-tight rust orange shirt. The seal on his arm too expired, and he retrieved his scrolls and ninja equipment. This new attire was better than the last one, and he wouldn't be recognized as easily. Well, he would still be recognized because of his whisker marks, but there was no way to hide them without wearing something on his face. "Her name, let's see. I think it was Mocha." "Man, did that babe have some fangs. I can't believe you forgot her name." Kyuubi roared in his head in disappointment. Naruto put his weapons pouch back on his hip and sat in the grass. He created a shadow clone that drew seals on his wrist for his shurikens. "Hey, in my defense, it's not my fault. With all the blood-sucking she did, I'm surprised I didn't pass out." "No, I'm glad I didn't pass out," he said, getting up after the clone finished and sealed his shurikens. "Why are you glad you didn't pass out?" a voice said behind the blonde. "Oh, this one Kai." The blonde slowly turned around to see Madara and Sasuke standing meters away from him. "What the fuck are you doing here? And how long have you been standing there?" Naruto said, getting ready to put his new skills to the test, dispelling the clones at his house to gain more knowledge. Madara smirked behind his mask as he glanced at Sasuke. "Sasuke here couldn't wait to fight you on the battlefield. So after hunting for a couple days, well, here we are. We just caught a fox," Madara said, chuckling at his joke. "Really?" the 2 teens thought, glancing at the older Uchiha. "Listen, old man, just let me handle this. You just stay back and don't get in my way, or I'll kill you next," Sasuke said, hopping off the tree and landed on his feet meters away from Naruto. "Finally we meet again, Dobby. I hope you're at full power right now, because I sure am," the demented teen said, putting a hand on his sword. Naruto stared at his former teammate and noticed something different about him. His eyes contained more focus than rage, and his stance showed his confidence in his apparent victory. "Uh-oh, I was afraid of this," the blonde's inner Kitsun said. "Afraid of what?" Naruto asked, unsealing a pair of elongated blades. They were black and only one side was sharpened while the other was jagged or serrated. He didn't know how to explain it. He held them in a reverse grip and got into a relaxed, but ready stance. "Do you remember Uchiha Itachi?" Kyuubi asked as memories of Itachi flashed through Naruto's mind. Flashback. Naruto opened the door to the hotel, only to come face to face with a pair of fully matured Sharingan eyes. It flashed again to show Itachi's body turning into a flock of crows and flying away. Once again it flashed to show one of those same crows flying right into his mouth and him swallowing it. "I've given you a large amount of my power, use it wisely." The blonde was left speechless, unable to give a reply to the retreating Uchiha. The image faded to show rain falling from the sky and Naruto's soaking body standing over Itachi's eyeless corpse. Nothing was said between Naruto and the rest of the group as Naruto took a knee, his hand brushing a loose strand of hair away from the Uchiha's eyeless sockets. "I will, Itachi-san, the knowledge and power you have given me will help me right your wrongs," the blonde whispered as he stood to his feet. Release flashback. Naruto was returned to the area when his memories shattered around him. He was returned to see Sasuke raising an eyebrow at his blades. Before the Uchiha could question the blonde about his blades, Naruto spoke. "So you took your brother's eyes?" The blonde didn't really ask, but stated it like a statement. "You reached an all-time low, Sasuke Tem." The blonde seethed as his pupils stretched horizontally and he entered sage mode. He was glad he knew how to remain completely still, in any position, thanks to his training. The younger Uchiha ignored the taunt and changed his regular Sharingan to his eternal Mangekyou Sharingan, which was a weird mix of both his and his brother's Mangekyou Sharingans. Meanwhile, the elder Uchiha was watching from his perch on a nearby tree branch. Finally, the time has come for these two to fight. After all, it's fate that brought them together. During the pause, Naruto had continued to gather nature chakra, making the bright orange of his iris become dark orange. Then he vanished, surprising both the Uchihas at his speed. But their eternal Sharingans faintly recognized the path the sage took. Sasuke held up his Kusanagi to the left to block one of Naruto's blades. His knees buckled a little due to the power behind the strike. He was barely able to push the blonde off of him. Said blonde did a backflip and landed 3 meters away from the douche bag. The Uchiha felt liquid on his cheek and lifted his left hand to his left cheek and looked at the liquid on his fingers. Blood. But how? He muttered. His eyes darkened and a twisted smirk appeared on his face. This just became a lot more exciting, he said. The blonde smirked at his former comrade, hearing what he said. He took a couple of hops back and furthered the length of the sharp wind on his blade. He flexed his fist as he did so, to further ready himself. Madara watched from his spot and smirked at the two. It's a shame for someone so skilled to fall, the way he will. Soon I will have my pet back, only to trade it in for a better pet. He stopped thinking to return his focus to the fight. 2 hours later. The clearing had been completely destroyed. Black flames were everywhere. There were craters inside of craters. In the biggest was Naruto, and he was crouching in the middle, with 8 tails swaying behind him. His body composition was that of a miniature Kyuubi, minus fur and a tail. On the floor in front of the mini kitsune was Sasuke. The life in his eyes were gone on and his body was completely missing its right side. The young Uchiha's blood was spread all around the battlefield. Instead of taking full control of Naruto, the fox stayed true to the deal he and the blonde made long ago and returned the control to the teen. The physical makeup of the fox's body twisted and turned in different directions, and minutes later it resembled that of a human. The 8 tails morphed and contorted and converged to form 2 tails. Seconds after that, the very dense Yaoki removed itself from the blonde's body, causing the genin's clothes to be revealed. Or what was left of the attire. The shirt had been ruined by countless Chidoris and bonds and various fire techniques. Madara stood half a kilometer away because of the destructiveness and longevity of the fight, had destroyed the area they were fighting in. I'm surprised young Naruto killed his best friend. Of course Sasuke had no intention of holding himself back, and had no doubt about wanting to kill his rival. But Naruto of all people, coming out on top, what kind of training did he put himself through since the 3 months ago? Madara began walking towards the epicenter of the destruction, watching the blonde carefully. The weight of killing his friend would soon cross his mind. Naruto looked down at the remains of his old friend. His eyes started to slightly burn and his weary body forced him to his knees. He rubbed his eyes for a while and opened them, only to come face to face with Sasuke's own face. He had a small flashback to the time he and Sasuke had an intense fight at the Valley of the End. It's ironic, isn't it, Sasuke? This time it's me over you. I wish you wouldn't have forced my hand at this. He lifted his hand to Sasuke's eyes and closed his eyelids. Jabutsu Shuru, Watashi no Yujin, he said softly, as the pain in his eyes subsided before disappearing altogether. Naruto paid no attention to the chakra leaving his eyes. He turned to the last and true Uchiha on the face of the earth. Kyuubi also didn't pay any attention to his container's eyes. Listen, brat, you still have to get rid of the man's annoying ability. Make the seal, be careful, because he won't let you, the kitsune said. The blonde barely had a word the fox said, but moved to do what he was planning to, which was to fortunately make the seal. The teen smirked and formed a cross seal with his fingers, Chijikage Bunshin no Jutsu. He muttered and summoned 1,000 clones that with the Kyuubi's single-tailed cloak, charged at the Uchiha. The elder was smirked and begun to show the blonde just why he was feared. If he had just become intangible and rushed the original, it wouldn't have ruined his fun. The original Naruto used his enhanced speed and hightailed it out of there. Seconds after he left, a large column of black flames shot up in the air. The memories of his clones made him work faster on his seal. Halfway through the seal, Madara appeared behind him and tried to take his head off. It would have happened if Naruto didn't sense the man at the exact moment he appeared. He began jumping backwards, still drawing the seal as fast and as best as he could. He was cursing himself for spilling sake on his previous dimension seal, a couple of hours ago when he was on the cruise. He would have made another one, but yeah, Mocha happened. Madara pursued his target and fired multiple fireballs and even a couple of air bullets at said target. The blonde dodged some of the techniques and used his tails to swat the Uchiha's body away, along with the rest of the techniques. The swat caused the man to bounce and skid along the ground. The blonde chuckled. These Uchiha did not know how to predict the movements of his chakra tails. He knew as soon as Madara recovered from the attack he was going to be pissed about it. Just like Sasuke was, so he started gathering chakra in front of him. His ears twitched and he ducked, barely avoiding a bladed fan. He turned and kicked the man in his chest and rolled on the ground, thankful that he didn't mess up any of the ink or the seal. He resumed gathering the chakra, and before he knew it he was finished charging up. He compressed the ball of chakra and ate it. Madara got back to his feet. He wasn't Naruto to retain his reflexes even after just fighting Sasuke. Playtime is over. It's time to end this little game. Naruto roared his chakra beam at the Uchiha and watched in satisfaction when the man was vaporized. He kept it up for as long as he could, just to make sure. He only had the beam up for at least a minute. He stopped the beam and dropped to his knees, dropping his paper and ink brush on the floor, where the ink began to travel along the paper. He had finished the seal, but what he didn't know was that it wasn't how it was supposed to be. Panting, he looked up to see Madara standing in the same spot, without any damage to his body. He suddenly gasped when his twin-tailed Yauki cloak dematerialized and he was left without the power of the Kyuubi and Sage mode. He grabbed the paper, not looking at it, and charged towards the Uchiha, using lightning chakra to quicken his pace. Within a meter of the man, he heard two words he didn't think he would hear again. Shinra Tensei. He was immediately pushed back by an invisible force. Now it was his turn to skid along the dirt. Naruto crouched to his knees and grunted in pain. A broken left arm, a twisted right ankle, 4 cracked ribs on his right side and 3 broken ones on his left would do that to you. Not to mention the blood seeping into his right eye, from a jagged cut above his brow by a couple of rocks from when he was sliding on his face a moment ago. With his right eye shut he glared at the Uchiha, angry that he had such a technique when he thought only Nagato could do that because of his Rinnegan. He rose to his feet, using his left foot to support his weight. It was useless for the Kyuubi to heal his wounds, due to the amount he already used and his body couldn't take any more of it. He let a minimal amount of lightning chakra surge through his body, focusing on the injured spots to numb the pain just a bit. It still hurt like a bitch though. He slowly bent down to pick the paper back up, not caring that it was dirty because it was still going to help finish off this menace once and for all. Madara had been watching his target for the past minute, studying him. He knew that he was exhausted from Sasuke and still had the stamina to fight. After seeing the blonde get up he had to give him some respect, and the only one he has given respect on this level was Hashirama Senju, the Shodai Hokage. Panting at the exertion his body was going through, Naruto slowly started to limp over to Madara. He had a plan. It was going to cause much pain to his body and he hoped it worked. The Uchiha watched the blonde start limping towards him. This kid's tolerance for pain is incredible, he thought, and his eyes widened when the brat disappeared. Naruto, using the power of lightning, rushed through the battlefield. He ran and thrust his arm towards the man and went right through him. Since he knew that was going to happen he continued for a little over 5 minutes. He was extremely tired now, and knew that if he stopped he was going to drop, so he kept going with this thought in mind. He was surprised that the next time he tried to slap the seal on Madara, said man moved out the way instead of allowing the blonde to go through him. That's it, he could only keep up his intangible ability for 5 minutes before he has to recharge. Kyuubi, give me a little dose of chakra to surprise him and I could finally end this, Naruto said, running towards the Uchiha, for what he wanted to be the last time. Madara was carefully dodging the blonde now and he was suffering from some anxiety since he was now vulnerable to his attacks. He was having a flashback to when he fought Sannin, except this time he wasn't going to sacrifice his last remaining Sharingan to use Izanagi. If he did that, all his planning would be for naught, as he needed a Sharingan to cast onto the moon for his Moon Eye plan. He would have used Shinra Tensei again, but he was inexperienced in using the Rinnegan and because of that he could only use it every 5 minutes. He was going to do it now, but became surprised when Naruto went even faster than he was already going. Naruto appeared in front of the Uchiha in half a second and charged up his seal, ready to slap it on Madara's chest. The Uchiha was surprised that instead of the seal being placed on him, a blinding flash of light occurred right in his face. He covered his eyes in pain since both his doujutsus were activated, while his Rinnegan couldn't be deactivated. He opened them to find nobody around him. He couldn't even feel Naruto's chakra around, none of it. He looked around not finding the blonde. After a while he became angered. Son of a bitch, I just lost the fucking Kyuubi. Fucking Sasuke, fucking Naruto. Fuck. Madara yelled. He looked at the sky. Zetsu, find him, search everywhere, he commanded. Black Zetsu rose from the ground a meter away from him. Yes, Madara-sama. The black thing said before sinking back into the ground. The Uchiha stood around for a while longer, just seething in rage. H. He roared in anger, using Shinra Tensei and warping out of the area. Now the only thing in the air was a crater inside another crater. Shinobi Central Command. The 4 cages were having a war council. The Kazekage was absent due to being the commander of the army and fighting with his own squad of shinobi. And speaking of the Kazekage, why the hell are we just sitting here? The Kazekage gets to fight with his people, why can't we fight with ours? The Raikage yelled, slamming his fist on the seal-reinforced table. For once I agree with the Raikage. We are wasting time, which is something we cannot afford, with Madara out there hunting for the lost Kyuubi. I say capitalize on the Uchiha's absence and destroy this army of white blob things. The Tsuchikage. The Raikage and the Tsuchikage exchanged looks and nodded to each other. The Mizukage rolled her eyes. You both need to calm down. We have business to discuss and we can't do it with you two complaining every few minutes. I know you want to get out there and fight with the others, I do too, but the lil cutie is gaining war experience the longer he's out there by himself, with everyone depending on his orders. The auburn-haired female said, leaning her hand on her right palm. And what would you know about leading armies into foreign territory? If I'm correct, you gained your experience during a civil war, not to mention you've only been a Kage for how long? The old man asked her. Listen, 3 of us Kages have only been in the position for maybe 3 years tops due to certain circumstances. We all know you and Raikage Dono have been in this position and it far exceeds our own time in office. But that subject doesn't matter. What matters is what each of us can do to help our troops in defeating the enemy. Tsunade said, entering the argument. You know what, Hokage Dono, you're right. What we have to do as war-experienced Kages is know what our enemy is going to do next. And this is why this war council has been called. The Mizukage said, supporting her fellow female Kage. The other Kages grudgingly agreed and calmed down. Good, now we can begin this meeting, Tsunade said, making a few hand seals and a hologram image of the elemental nations appeared. Okay, according to our scouts, the Akatsuki base is here, she said, pointing at a country in the middle of Taki no Kuni and Ta no Kuni. We are going to mobilize our troops through his own and gather around the base. We all know these white blobs are just the infantry in the army, basically cannon fodder awaiting the slaughter. But word from our ambush squads says that the enemy has reawakened the use of Edo Tensei and has made these dead puppets even more dangerous than the ones my old teammate Orochimaru used. The specifics of just who was resurrected is a mystery, but I expect our troops to expect anybody and everybody," she said as a large cracking noise interrupted the meeting. Everyone looked at their teacups to see if it cracked. All of their eyes widened when all of them had a huge crack from top to bottom. It was a second later when the cups broke completely in half and the tea flowed out of the cups and onto the desk. They didn't pay much attention to the liquid because soon after that they all began to hear a rumble that shook the room. They looked in the middle of the desk to see a swirling ripple began to distort the air. Knowing who was appearing, they each stood up. Soon Madara appeared, ki leaking from his very soul, causing the 4 cages to sweat a little at the actual weight of the intent. "This ki is more heavier than the last time we fought," the Sandaime Tsuchikage mumbled under his breath. They each rose their head in confusion when they heard speaking. "Where is he?" the crazed Uchiha spoke menacingly. Tsunade gasped. "Who?" she simply said as anything else would cause her to faint. "We don't know who you're talking about," the muscled Ryukage said, trying to keep his composure. "Don't lie to me," he yelled, pushing the cages to the walls of the room, not using Shinra Tensei, but with the force of his chakra. Each of the cages hit a separate wall. "Ah, my hip!" yelled Unoki as he felt the pain of a broken hip. The one-armed Ryukage didn't feel anything from hitting the wall thanks to his dense muscles. But he did get ready for a full-fledged fight. The goddamn Mizukage slid to the floor, the wall behind her melting from the excess chakra she was leaking from her body. Tsunade hit the wall but wasn't allowed to slide to the floor as she felt herself being pulled by an unknown force. Her hazel-brown eyes was met with both the Sharingan and Rinnegan eyes, which surprised her. "Tell me where you hid Uzumaki Naruto. I'll leave this timeline at this point. There's no point in continuing it. Everything is now irrelevant in what I'm trying to say." With Naruto. A battlefield during the Second Ninja World War. The first battle, to be exact, as war just begun. This battlefield was where Naruto was found by a group of Jounin. "Sir, we found this boy unconscious a couple of miles away from our border on Kumo's side," the leader Jounin said, laying the boy on the couch. The leader of Konoha was the Nidaime Hokage, Senju Tobirama. A young man who wore armor as white as his hair. He had red markings along his cheek line and light blue eyes. He folded his hands in front of him and glanced at the boy on his couch. "He looks around the age of 5. Sending him to the orphanage would be useless at this time. Now is the time of war. I must see if he has what it takes to be a ninja. We'll wait until he regains consciousness to find out what he knows. In the meantime, send him to the hospital for a checkup." "Hey," they said as one picked the kid up and held him bridal style, before he jumped out the window, headed towards the hospital. The Nidaime stood, watching as his ninja escorted the young child. That kid has power deep within him. When he receives the right training, Konoha would be unstoppable, he thought as a ninja entered his office. "Mission accomplished, Tobirama-sensei." Once Arutobi Hiruzen said, walking into the room. The man nodded. "Ah, yes. How difficult was it for you to destroy one of Iwa's stronghold?" Hiruzen took a seat and leaned back a little. "Well, one would think doing something like that would be difficult when one is alone. But it was much easier. Of course I was without the use of chakra for the duration of the mission. The mission was almost compromised when I witnessed a group of shinobi locate one of my traps." "What happened after?" "They must have been retarded because they shrugged and continued patrolling, thinking the trap was one of theirs." They shared a short laugh and stood up. "Great job, my student. So do I understand you're finally going to take up one of your own genin team soon?" Sarutobi nodded. "That's correct. I feel it's finally time to pass down my knowledge. Who knows, they might become stronger than me one day." Konoha Hospital 3 days later. Beep beep. "WH, where am I?" a young voice thought. Beep beep. "What's that noise? It's annoying as hell." Beep beep. "Wait, what happened to Madara?" The machine started beeping faster. Beep beep beep. "What's wrong with him?" a voice was heard. "I don't know, His heartbeat just went faster. A second voice said, "Whose voices are these? Are they experimenting on me? Or are they finally taking the QB from me?" Naruto thought. "Well, don't just stand there, help me." Naruto's eyes snapped open, the bright light blinding him. "Don't touch me." His voice was young, but he didn't notice because it was a little hoarse. He's awake." A female nurse stammered. She has short light blue hair and light purple eyes. She wore the standard nursing outfit. She was in her late 20s, her face was cute and her lips were tinged with blue. Her bust was a large D cup and her hips were fairly large, leading to a large rump. Her figure was that of an average kunoichi, and he could tell that nursing was just a part-time job, by the way she carried herself. But how? It was estimated that he was supposed to be out for at least another week. The second female nurse said. She was in her early 20s. She had brown hair with dark green eyes. She too wore the standard nursing outfit. This nurse was different. She wore no lipstick and her brown hair was rather long. Her bust was a small B cup, and her hips were small, however she still had a nice butt. She spent her life being a nurse, with no amount of ninja training. Naruto was confused. "What do you mean, where am I?" he asked. "In the village hidden in the leaves," the Nidame said, walking in the room. Naruto looked at the door to see the Nidame Hokage. His eyes widened, his face pale, and he didn't pay attention to what the man said. "Am I dead?" he asked, gulping loudly. Confusion showed on the faces of Tobirama and the nurses. "Wait, the furball." He closed his eyes. "Furball, where are you?" he yelled in his mind. With no response, his eyes snapped open. "What's wrong, child?" The blonde leveled a glare at the man. "I am not a child." The brown-haired nurse grabbed a nearby hand mirror and showed Naruto his reflection. "Holy fuck, I'm a child," he yelled, just now noticing how small his entire body was. "What the fuck happened to me?" he whispered under his breath. He began to have a flashback to the last thing that happened. "I remember now, I killed Sasuke. Was I unable to kill Madara with him?" He then began to remember his friend, "Sasuke, I'm sorry again for having to take your life." His eyes began to burn like the time after he killed Sasuke. The blonde began to furiously rub his eyes, causing the nurses to panic. "What's wrong with your eyes, child?" the purple-eyed nurse asked. "They're burning." The blonde answered the question. The Senju moved closer to the boy. "Show me your eyes," he spoke sternly. Naruto spent the next 2 minutes rubbing his eyes, before the pain started to lessen. He slowly began to open his eyes, causing the Hokage to reel back in shock. "What's wrong?" Naruto asked curiously. Your eyes." The sight of the surprised Hokage surprised the occupants in the room. "My eyes?" Naruto thought, terrified about what he might learn. He reached for the mirror on his lap and slowly rose it to eye level, keeping his eyes closed. After taking a deep breath, he opened his eyes. The first thing he saw in his new eyes was the ripple-like pattern effect around his pupil and a light purple iris and sclera. "Ah, damn it. That explains why my eyes were hurting. I have the Rinnegan," he muttered. Do another one bites the dust. Do another one bites the dust. And another done, and another one done, another one bites the dust. Finished with another first chapter of a new story. Man, this is getting a little difficult with my schedule the way it is. I'm so glad with my accomplishments. 2 new stories down and 1 to go. After the new one, then I'll work on the blue-eyed Uchiha, and then it's Betrayal's turn. Now visit my profile and vote in the poll for which one of my new stories will join the cycle along with Betrayal and blue-eyed Uchiha. Remember, read and review all 3 stories before voting in the poll. The booth will close by the time blue-eyed Uchiha gets updated. Well, it's sleepy time.